Hello? Hi, I'm Glenda Marlowe, calling from ClearPath Diagnostics. Is this Miss Vexley?
Yes, this is she.
I'm calling with your colonoscopy results. Is this a good time?
Shh, honey, quiet down. Mommy's on the phone. Yeah, this is fine.
Okay. Um, Miss Vexley, there's no easy way to say this. Unfortunately, your colonoscopy confirmed our suspicions. You have colon cancer.
What? I, I, I don't understand.
Mommy, you have cancer?
What is cancer? Why haven't we found the cure yet? Is it possible to find a cure to this disease that's killing millions of people every year? Let's talk about it.
As Dr. Mukherjee writes in his biography of cancer, the emperor of all maladies, cancer is a disease caused by the uncontrolled growth of a single cell. This growth is unleashed by mutations, changes in DNA that specifically affect genes that incite unlimited cell growth. In a normal cell, powerful genetic circuits regulate cell division and cell death. In a cancer cell, these circuits have been broken, unleashing a cell that cannot stop growing. That this seemingly simple mechanism, cell growth without barriers, can lie at the heart of this grotesque and multifaceted illness is a testament to the unfathomable power of cell growth. Cell division allows us as organisms to grow, to adapt, to recover, to repair, to live. And distorted and unleashed, it allows cancer cells to perform the same functions as human cells, to live at the cost of our living. Cancer cells can grow faster and adapt better. They are more perfect versions of ourselves.
In 2025, it is projected that there will be over 2 million cases of this disease and over 618,000 deaths from it. The American Cancer Society alone reportedly invested over $132 million in 2024 to researching this disease. Yet, we haven't found a cure.
I mean, especially right here at home, in Pittsburgh. We have some of the best research teams and doctors in the country. How are they still stumped after so long?
I don't know, Lauren. This seems like a much bigger beast than people realize.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Practically everyone knows at least one person in their life that has been affected by cancer.
I mean, yeah. According to the National Cancer Institute, at some point, cancer restrains the lives of nearly 41% of men and women in the United States.
In this episode, we'll hear from a brave cancer survivor, discuss the potential role of the American diet in cancer, prevention, and modern pharmaceutical solutions.
I'm Needle Bowser.
And I'm Lauren Kirsch. And
welcome
to our discussion.
To begin, we have a dear friend and former high school teacher of mine, Amy Conaway, give her powerful testimony of how God carried her through a battle with breast cancer.
Okay, well, it was probably the end of September, beginning of October, that I was just getting a shower, and my mom had breast cancer when she was pretty young, so I always did self-exams, and I've gotten mammograms since I was 28, so I've been, I pay pretty close attention, but I found a lump. And I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say I kind of freaked out about it, but called the doctor right away that morning, and I had a mammogram scheduled for like 2 weeks later, and I begged them to move it up. So they did move it up, and the mammogram showed, hey, there's a lump. And so then they had to do a biopsy of it. So I was trying not to be too upset about it, because it really could be anything. It could have been a calcium deposit. It could have been,
Right.
something non-cancerous. It didn't necessarily have to be cancer, but they did a biopsy, and then the biopsy came back that, yeah, it was cancer. It was during the pandemic in 2020, so I was doing all of these doctor's appointments by myself because you weren't allowed to have anybody else in with you. My primary care doctor called me at work and said, I want to see you before the end of the day. Can you come right now? I knew something was wrong because they don't say you need to come right now. She told me, and I was by myself because you weren't allowed to have anybody in with you. I cried, and then she was like, trying to walk me through the process of what I needed to do next. So I was like, okay, and I'm trying to remember, and it's hard because you're just thinking, I have cancer. Drove the whole way home crying, and you just have to let it out, though. I can look back and see now, it's a pretty strong emotion. You weren't allowed to have anybody in with you. So I had to do all my chemo treatments by myself. So there were days that I was really positive and days that I felt sorry for myself. But I mean, my treatment really couldn't have gone more smoothly. And, chemo is rough on your body, and it messes with your head too. And then with the chemo that I did lose my hair. That was probably one of the hardest things, having to look like I was escaped from the concentration camp.
Oh my God.
That's what I felt like. So you feel like really ugly. Everybody's like, oh, you're beautiful, but you're not. And then, of course, I, had my wig that I named Ethel, and I hated her. I hated Ethel. I mean, Ethel kept me from being bald, so I guess she served her purpose. But she was hot and itchy and a real pain in the rear. And so if she wasn't $400, I would have burned her when this was all over, but she's in a box. Like, naming my wig a stupid name was helpful because it was funny, and humor is a really great thing to help you to get through difficult things. Like, if you can laugh about it, it's helpful. I did a lot of praying. I knew that God was making me walk through this for a reason. We know that from the scripture, that everything we do is for our good and part of God's plan. Keeping that in perspective was also really helpful, because I knew, even though I couldn't see it then, that whatever difficulties that I was walking through with this cancer was going to help somebody else down the road. I didn't know how. I also knew, like, being a teacher, I had many, many eyes watching me and how I handled this difficulty in my life. It was a teaching opportunity to show my students that, hey, this isn't just something I teach you and give you a test on. This is something that is real, and you have to walk it out. See, look, God will get you through difficult times. He's your anchor. And, whatever happens, he's in control. And I wanted them to see that in my attitude, in my words, and my actions. So that was kind of a goal for me, to walk this out well.
While our survivor's story specifically talks about breast cancer, it's interesting to see the overlap across cancers.
Yeah, the similarities are actually super interesting. One commonality that most Americans have is that they know what the food pyramid is. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it, but I'm not really sure of the specifics of it.
Well, Lauren, guess what? It was founded in 1992 by the USDA to help Americans make smart choices in their diet. Its recommendations included carbs as the base of the pyramid, eating 11 servings of carbs a day, like bread, rice, cereal, pasta, and on and on.
Wow, that's really a lot of carbs.
Well, it also recommended 3 to 5 servings of vegetables, 2 to 4 servings of fruit, and 2 to 3 servings of both dairy products and meat or other proteins. Fats, oils, and sweets were to be rarely eaten.
I remember when I was an exercise science major here and the teachers were really promoting eating fats. But, like, why does the USDA say differently?
Well, in an article that we found called Rebuilding the Food Pyramid by Walter Willett and Mira Stamfer, they discuss how even when the food pyramid was being developed by the USDA, nutritionists had long known that some types of fat are essential to health and can reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. And scientists even found very little evidence that a high intake of carbohydrates was beneficial at all. More and more evidence over the years has shown that the USDA pyramid is basically a joke.
Wow, that's crazy. So many Americans still fear incorporating fats into their diet, and they're all about eating carbs because it gives them energy. We need to realize how refined carbs like rice and bread can actually have such bad effects. Many people even consider potatoes vegetables, but that's really a refined carb. This is probably the reason why rates of heart disease and obesity have been increasing over the past decades in the US.
That's exactly right. So, as Americans, we need to be a lot better educated on our diets for sure. So, the first thing is that we should stop eating so many refined carbs and try and replace those with whole grains. Saturated fats should also be eaten less, which are found in lots of dairy products and red meat. They're known to raise blood cholesterol, which can lead to a high risk of coronary heart disease. Unsaturated fats found in fish and avocado could possibly be preventative of these things.
I'm learning so much already.
I'm so glad to hear that, Lauren. Good thing we did the research for this project. So, everyone should definitely become more well informed on what can benefit your health. You know what's even more shocking, Lauren?
No, what?
Simple sugars like glucose, which can be found in a lot of the foods we're talking about, like white bread and cereals, can even accelerate cancer growth.
What? How is that even possible?
Well, let's get into it. So, in normal cells, GLUT1 is like a door that allows glucose to cross the cell membrane to help glycolysis run. And essentially, glycolysis is the body's way of turning sugar, such as glucose, into usable energy without the need for oxygen. So, imagine you ate something sweet like, like a Hicks cookie.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that cookie will get broken down into glucose, which is a type of sugar that your cells love to use. However, your cells can't use the glucose directly, and they have to process it first. And basically that process is glycolysis.
Oh, yeah, I remember learning about glycolysis in biochem with Dr. Paz. In glycolysis, glucose is chomped in half, creating two smaller molecules. Those molecules are called pyruvate. As it chomps and rearranges things, it pulls out some energy, which is stored in special batteries called ATP. ATP is the energy our body uses for pretty much everything, like moving and breathing. The pyruvate molecules are modified in the mitochondria, and they're turned into this molecule called acetyl-CoA. This is then added to a process called the CAC cycle, which produces lots of ATP. These processes need oxygen though, and some electrons, which are small negative particles, are also removed during this process, and they're sent off to make even more energy.
Yeah, so to break that down for our listeners, basically cancer cells have a higher number of GLUT1, which, as we talked about earlier, is sort of the door that allows the glucose to come into the cell. And then, cancer cells also express PKM2 instead of PKM1, which is a different kind of protein, which decreases the amount of pyruvate that Lauren just talked about. So, since less pyruvate is formed, cancer cells rely on glycolysis solely for energy, which doesn't require oxygen. Cancer cells prefer glycolysis as their energetic process because it's faster and it provides other products that are needed to build nucleotides, amino acids, lipids, and all of these things are important for cancer cells to grow extremely rapidly. So, glycolysis alone does not require oxygen, which helps the cancer cells to always thrive even in low oxygen conditions. I'll also say something, lactate, which is a byproduct of glycolysis, makes the overall environment acidic, so it is removed to decrease acidity. Removing lactic acid helps cancer cells evade the immune system and promote invasion. So they're kind of hiding.
Yeah, I heard that there are also so many factors that can hyperactivate the door, GLUT1, making this process even faster. They are called oncogenes. And some oncogenes, such as RAS, which we discussed in our class, activate downstream pathways such as PI3K, which then activates GLUT1 even more. There are genes that also stop tumors from being formed in the body. These are called tumor suppressor genes, and one of these that's commonly talked about is P53.
Yeah, so all of that to say that every single type of cancer is incredibly complex. And so the mechanisms are extremely unique and also very detailed. So there's no wonder why scientists have had difficulty finding a cure. So, yeah, that's a lot to grapple with, and honestly, it's kind of overwhelming for us to even talk about.
With that said, Lynn and I have dug up something that we think could be used as a preventative measure and even some treatments.
The first thing I want to mention is the clinical applications that can sort of be drawn out from the standard American diet. So, like we talked about earlier, if we know that glucose sort of powers these malignancies, in theory, cutting out the glucose should basically just cut off the power supply. So I asked Mrs. Conaway if her team prescribed her with any sort of low glucose diet.
I thought that they would, because one of the things they say is like when you have cancer, like don't eat sugar. Like I had heard that a lot, and like read a lot, and so I did meet with a nutritionist multiple times throughout the treatment, and I kept saying to them, are there things that I should be eating and things that I shouldn't be eating? And they're like, you eat whatever you can. If you're eating, I don't care what it is. I'm like, what if it's like cake? And they're like, fine, if you can eat cake and that's okay, then eat cake. I was like, okay, because that was a little weird to me, but I think it was because like with the chemo, you can get nauseous and food did taste really weird. Like I had to use plastic spoons and forks because the metal forks and spoons made the food taste terrible.
It's interesting to hear that doctors didn't alter Mrs. Conaway's diet, but the cancer did. While her team did not alter her diet, there is some research indicating that diet modification, specifically low-carb diets, may reduce the effects of cancer. According to Liguori and colleagues, mutant P53, which is a tumor suppressor gene that we talked about earlier, is actually degraded when it is deprived of glucose. But this could certainly be a challenge with the standard American diet we talked about earlier. A direct quote from the study says, "Taken together, these findings strongly indicate that some tumor-promoting forms of mutant P53 can be targeted for autophagic degradation through glucose restriction."
We should also mention that only certain P53 mutants are destroyed when starved of glucose. So, while this is a really great discovery, the treatment for those with colon cancer or even other types of cancer honestly still remains extremely complex.
Yeah, the authors of the study essentially concluded that the next step in this saga will be to see what combination of chemotherapy or targeted therapy will be more effective against mutant P53 tumors that are glucose restrictive.
Another study that we found while doing research for this podcast was by Song and colleagues, and it compared mortality rates in colorectal cancer patients with varying diets. Their results showed that mortality rates were lower in patients who consumed plant-rich, low-carbohydrate diets. Also noteworthy that this was seen in patients with non-metastatic colorectal cancer.
I know you just mentioned low-carb diets, and I mean, for me personally, my life has recently revolved around the low-carb diet, and I feel like it honestly has a lot of benefits. I was diagnosed with celiac in the winter of 2019, and celiac disease, for those who don't know, is an autoimmune disease, which is basically when your body's own immune system attacks itself. It is triggered by an immune response, in this case, it's gluten, which the body treats as a foreign invader. It can ultimately lead to mucosal damage in the intestines disease, which can be reversed by avoiding gluten. And I remember the doctor telling me my mom also has celiac disease. So when she was diagnosed, they kind of told her that if you didn't follow the gluten-free diet, that you could possibly be at greater risk of colon cancer. And I found that extremely alarming.
An article by Miriam Hayter and other research actually suggests a heightened risk of developing specific malignant neoplasms in various malignancies, including gastrointestinal lymphomas, non-melanoma, and melanoma skin cancer, and various others in people with celiac disease.
This research shows one example of preventing cancer, especially in patients with celiac disease, with their gluten-free diet. And that's definitely one of the reasons why, if someone asked me if I would ever eat a cheat meal or something, like a slice of cake at a party, yeah, I would say no, because I know it could have some serious consequences besides just getting sick. The risk of cancer in individuals with celiac disease is most pronounced within the first year after diagnosis. And that really makes sense because that's when the inflammation is the worst. The most significant increase in cancers in the study was found to be small intestinal adenocarcinomas. This makes sense with what I was saying earlier, because the disease is characterized by villous atrophy in the small intestine and crypt hypertrophy. The risk of cancers decreases likely due to better adherence to that gluten-free diet and may even become statistically non-significant.
Well, yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense that the gluten-free diet would reduce risk of cancer in patients with celiac disease, then as it tries to reverse the damage that the autoimmune disease has caused, I guess. So, increased malignancies can be seen in patients with celiac disease due to long-term inflammation and release of pro-inflammatory cytokines, nutritional deficiencies, and continual antigen stimulation, which may all be reduced with the adherence to the gluten-free diet.
Yeah, I'm so grateful all this research has been done in the recent years to really figure out more about this disease and its possible long-term effects.
Although similar to a diet solely low in carbs, a ketogenic diet, which we talk about a lot in the exercise science department, emphasizes high fat content and thus lower protein and carb intake, is also thought to be a preventative method of cancer. In an article by Dr. Neha and Kodhari, they reported studies of ketogenic diets that have the ability to influence glucose metabolism and glucose-dependent signaling in cancer cells. So this would essentially decrease circulating glucose concentrations and in contrast elevate ketone bodies, which is fundamental to the anti-cancer effects of the ketogenic diet.
With no glucose available and the ketones used as an energy source, cancer cells are essentially starved since they're unable to adapt to ketone metabolism. Ketogenic diets have decreased blood glucose, insulin, and IGF-1 levels. This all leads to the reduced activation of the PI3K pathway, which we discussed earlier in this podcast.
So, not only does the ketogenic diet reduce the available glucose in the body, but it also leads to the downregulation of amino acids, which cancer needs an increased amount of due to glycolysis solely being used. This might also be the reason why tumor development is essentially suppressed.
That's amazing. The article goes to further state that in the majority of preclinical trials of the ketogenic diet, that demonstrated the ability to reduce tumor growth, increase survival rates in the mice, prevent tumor progression, and modify the mechanism of bodily wasting induced by cancer. It may even boost the effectiveness of targeted treatments, such as inhibitors of PI3K, especially in breast cancer, which probably could have helped Mrs. Conaway in her treatment. More research needs to be done on whether these diets can truly be helpful in preventing cancer and reducing its effects.
Ultimately, the standard treatment for cancer is usually chemotherapy, radiation, and some type of surgery. And then in Mrs. Conaway's case, she also had a hormonal therapy option. These are considered to be the most effective, but in reality, there's currently no treatment that fully fulfills the requirements of being both effective and suitable for extremely aggressive cancers, so something new should honestly be tried.
Yeah, I agree. We can't keep only using the same harsh chemicals on all these poor patients if it's not 100% effective. We definitely have to incorporate some new preventative measures and therapies.
So, Lauren, I know we talked about your increased risk of particular types of cancer, especially if you didn't follow a gluten-free diet. So, there's several drugs out there right now that could actually be used for colorectal cancer. 5-fluorouracil can be administered via injection to treat colon, stomach, and even breast cancer. It's also available as a cream to remediate the damage of superficial basal cell carcinoma. Hopefully, in the near future, better treatment options will be available for those that are battling cancer. With that being said, Lauren and I want to thank you all for coming on this journey with us as we examined the similarities and the differences across the vast sea of cancers. Special thanks to Mrs. Conaway for agreeing to share her story with us. Our prayers go out to all those who lie in the wake of cancer's devastation. Now, a word from our fake sponsor, cetuximab.
Cetuximab. Cetuximab is a monoclonal antibody used to treat head and neck cancer and metastatic colorectal cancer. It works by targeting and blocking the epidermal growth factor receptor, inhibiting the growth and spread of many cancer cells. Potential side effects of cetuximab include skin rash, acne, fatigue, chills, fever, and diarrhea. Other skin reactions include skin dryness, crackling, and itching. Other common side effects include dehydration, diarrhea, fatigue, and electrolyte imbalance. Rare side effects of this drug can include cardiopulmonary arrest, sepsis, renal failure, and pulmonary embolism. If you're allergic to this drug, do not take it.